This is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples' Truths. Justice for all, the most dangerous show on media anywhere. OCO, Taishu, Shidanalai, Ayajigola Waya Sonoy. I'm Jay Winter Nightwolf, and this is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples' Truths. Justice for all, the most dangerous show on media anywhere. We have a very special guest tonight, and I'll be introducing her a little later. But before that, we're going to go to news from Indian country with my cohort, Sandra Hope, and yours truly. Don't go away. Hello, Sandra. How you doing?
Jay, happy Wednesday. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Middle of the week, hump day.
Yes.
Sandra, you remember when President Obama was elected as the President of the United States?
I do.
At that time, Canada elected a Black woman from the Caribbean to be the Governor General of Canada. Now that Biden is in office, we've got Deb Haaland, who is the first Indigenous woman to serve in a cabinet position in the United States government. And she's an Indigenous woman from, I believe it's New Mexico, Arizona. I have a news article, and it seems as though every time the United States does something, Canada follows suit. The first Indigenous person appointed as Canada's Governor General, Mary Simon, praised as a diplomat, advocate, and strong Inuk woman. A longtime advocate for the Inuit rights and a former leader of the Inuit Circumpolar Conference, has been tapped as Canada's 30th Governor General, the first Indigenous person to hold that office in Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the appointment of Mary Simon on June 6, followed by a press conference at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec. Trudeau said Queen Elizabeth II has approved the appointment. Trudeau praised Simon Inuk as a longtime bridge builder who brings together people from diverse backgrounds. It is truly an honor to introduce Canada's Governor General designate, Ms. Mary Simon. After 154 years, our country has a historic step. They've taken a historic step, and I cannot think of a better person to meet this moment. The Governor General is the vice-regal or representative of Canada's monarch, Elizabeth II, and holds a largely ceremonial position that is nonpartisan and apolitical. Since Canada is a constitutional monarchy where the duties of state and head of government are distinct, the Governor General represents the powers and responsibilities of the Queen. Simon began her remarks during a press conference by speaking in Inuktitut, followed by English. She said, "I can confidently say that my appointment is a historic and inspirational moment for Canada and an important step toward a long path towards reconciliation." The 73-year-old mother of three was once a broadcaster for CBC North and later began her career as a public servant when she was elected secretary of the board of directors of the Northern Quebec Inuit Association. My hat is off to her, and I'm hoping and praying that she will be the one to lead to the investigation of all of those children, Native children. Their bodies have been found recently, and it's over 2,000 of them that were buried in these unmarked graves in front of the boarding schools that they were kidnapped to by the Canadian government. Okay, Sandra, it's yours.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for that information. We want to say hi to Don Walker. We miss you. We wish you could have been here tonight, but Don Walker had a conflict. So Jay and I are going to do our best to cover some news items for you. So I think the first one I want to talk about, and I apologize in advance because I'm certainly going to mispronounce some of these names. I want to talk about a beautiful young woman that we lost on July 3rd. Her name was Hanani K. Trask, and she left us on July 3rd. Hanani, and I apologize, she was a descendant of the Pialani line of Maui and the Kahakumakulua line of Kauai.
Yes.
Her younger, yeah, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly.
No,
Her
you did
younger
good. Keep going.
sister, I'm sorry?
I said you did well. Keep going.
Okay, so her younger sister, Mililani, wrote about her that she has gone through the Alaula, the portal of the first light of dawn, to be embraced and eternally immortalized for the uplifting of her people. And Ms. Trask, she received her PhD in 1981 after completing a dissertation on feminist theory. And among many other achievements, she was an early, powerful member of the Hawaiian nationalist movement. And in 1985, she gave a speech called Journey to Justice. And in that speech, she famously spoke on the liberation of her people and how culture needed to be the core of political resistance. And she and her sister, Mililani, became fearless and bold advocates for Hawaiian sovereignty, and they were never afraid to call out injustice and colonialism. And it's been said about Hanani that no scholar has had a more profound impact on the intellectual development of the Hawaiian community. So our condolences go out to her family and all the people that she knew and her friends. She was a beautiful spirit, and please remember her and think wonderful thoughts about her. Hanani K. Trask.
Absolutely. She was also a friend of one of the past chiefs of the Mauis, my good friend, George Nuku. A few years ago, I was supposed to go to New Zealand to hang out with them. They were the ones that do the haka dance. And for some reason, I couldn't make that trip. I would have loved to have met her. So let's move on to the next subject, one that I've been talking about for, I know, the last 6 or 7 years. President Biden's administration formally launches efforts to return deported veterans to the United States. President Biden and Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas joined in a pledge of allegiance during the naturalization ceremony at the White House on July the 2nd. The Biden administration unveiled plans Friday to bring hundreds, possibly thousands, of deported veterans and their immediate family members back to the United States, saying their removal failed to live up to our highest values. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas ordered his department's immigration agencies to immediately take steps to ensure that military families may return to the United States. He said the department would also halt pending deportation proceedings against veterans on their immediate relatives who are in the United States and clear the way for those who are eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship. The Department of Homeland Security recognized the profound commitment and sacrifice that service members and their families have made to the United States of America. Mayorkas said in a statement Friday, "We are committed to bringing back military service members, veterans, and their immediate family members who were unjustly removed and ensuring that they receive the benefits to which they may be entitled." President Biden had promised on a campaign trail to direct DHS during his first 100 days in office to stop targeting veterans and their families for deportation and to create a process for veterans deported by the Trump administration to return to the United States. Veterans advocates have expressed concern in recent weeks that few veterans or their relatives have returned, while others remain in deportation proceedings. Many deported veterans also say they have been unable to access benefits such as health care from overseas. In a memo Friday, the heads of DHS's immigration agency said they will review policies to ensure that military veterans and their relatives are welcome to return in or return to the United States. Officials said they would also work with the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Defense Department to ensure that veterans can access their health benefits, including coronavirus vaccinations, and that recruits can take the oath of citizenship, including while at basic training. DHS will establish a military resource center online with a toll-free number and email address to help families with their immigration application. It's our responsibility to serve our veterans as well as they have served us, no matter who they are, where they are from, or the status of their citizenship. VA Secretary Dennis McDonough said in his statement, "Keeping the promise means ensuring that non-citizen service members, veterans, and their families are guaranteed a place in the country they swore an oath to, and in many cases fought to defend." Immigration and Customs Enforcement has deported veterans for decades, including when Biden was the vice president. The precise number of deportees is unclear because the government failed to screen veterans before deporting them. A 2019 Veteran Accountability Office report found. Advocacy organizations estimate the deported in hundreds of veterans and thousands of their relatives. I think it's more. I have one thing to say about this. This move on the part of the Biden administration brings a smile to my heart. Because 6 years ago, when I was on the radio in Washington, D.C., nobody would talk to these deported veterans about their problems. And I was the very first one to bring it to the airwaves here in the United States. And I've been working hand in hand with these guys for a very long time. My heart is a little lighter now because finally they're going to get their just due. You have no idea how many of them fought in Vietnam and how many died in Vietnam. And for them to not have accessibility to citizenship is a dire insult to them. They took this step forward, raised their right hands, and took the oath to defend the Constitution of the United States and the people of the United States. And this is what this government has done for them. Is that a reward? That's a punishment. So I'm happy Joe Biden has the heart and the nerve to step forward and correct this. And this will say a lot about him when it comes election time. Go ahead, Sandra, you're next.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jay. So let's talk about the late, great Chief Wilma Mankiller. A few days ago, Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. of the Cherokee Nation announced that the U.S. Mint had chosen the late Principal Chief Wilma Mankiller to be featured in the American Women Quarters Program. As many of you know, Mankiller was the first woman elected to serve as chief of the Cherokee Nation, and she stood up for tribal sovereignty and treaty rights and was a fierce champion for Indian country. She's being honored on the American Women Quarters Program alongside dignitaries like poet Maya Angelou, astronaut Sally Ride, suffrage leader Adelina Otero Warren, and actress Anna Mae Wong. And famously, Chief Mankiller once said, "Women in leadership roles can help restore balance and wholeness to our communities." So we are happy that Chief Mankiller is going to be included on the American Women's Quarters Program by the U.S. Mint.
And it's about time. I got a little story I want to tell you about Wilma Mankiller. I met her about 15 years ago at the National Museum of the American Indian. Somebody told me that she was speaking, and I always wanted to hear her. When I got there in the Rasmussen Theater, I was standing at the top looking down, and my eyes told me something that blew me away. When I saw her standing up there, it was like me looking at my mother. Wilma Mankiller and my mom could have been sisters or close twins. After she finished speaking, I went down to meet her, and she says, "Oh, I've heard of you. You're on the radio here." I said, "Yes, I am." She says, "Well, I haven't had anything to eat because I just got off the flight earlier today, and I need to find something to eat." I said, "Well, come on, let's go." She said, "Well, where are we going?" I said, "We're going to the cafeteria downstairs in the museum." She said, "Oh, okay." And Dr. Allison Henderson was with me. We went downstairs and we sat and we had a meal. And at that time, I used to carry a photograph of my mother in my wallet. I pulled it out and showed it to her. She said, "Who took this picture of me?" I said, "Chief, that's not you." "Well, who is that?" I said, "That's my mom." "Are you sure?" I said, "Absolutely." She said, "She could have been my sister." I said, "I know." And that's how our relationship started, you know. Wilma Mankiller did not back down from controversy. She did not back down from what was right. And somebody said something on a show previously about she was against the freedmen being in the Cherokee tribe. She was not. I knew that lady. She was very fair. She was not judgmental. And she said, anybody that's got Cherokee blood is a Cherokee. I said, thank you very much. So, Wilma, we are all missing you, and we're going to continue to miss you until that day that so many people that we know talk about as that great getting up morning. I will see you again, and I can't wait for you to meet my mother on the other side. And that's news from Indian country tonight. I'm Jay Winter Nightwolf, along with
Sandra Hope.
There you go. And we'll be back in a few minutes just to introduce, not just to, but to introduce my guest for today, a very close friend of mine. Don't go away. Welcome back to the most dangerous show on media anywhere. I have a very special guest who is a close friend of mine. Her name is Dr. FAYE Williams. And the most important thing you need to know about Dr. Williams, that she has worked tirelessly, working to make history. She has changed. She is a change maker. She's an advocate for women, children, civil rights, human rights, helping to change the narratives on education, diversity, empowerment, helping many to realize their full growth potential. She is a three-time author and a weekly contributor writer to Trice Ebony Wire Service and host of a weekly radio show titled Wake Up, Stay Woke on WPFW Radio out of Washington, D.C. My friend, Dr. Williams, is the president of the Dick Gregory Society and the national president and CEO of the National Congress of Black Women, the former counsel to the U.S. Congress, District of Columbia Subcommittee on the Judiciary and Education. She was appointed to the Presidential Scholars Commission by President Barack Obama and served as White House liaison to the U.S. Department of Energy during the Clinton administration. Some of her past appointments, of course, the present one is the National Congress of Black Women Incorporated, Board of Broadcast Broadband Everywhere, World Conference of Mayors. Dr. Williams, I love you dearly, but I'll be here for the next hour telling everybody about it.
Yep, you will.
She's one of the most influential Black Americans in Ebony Magazine, Power 150, Ebony Magazine, Key to Success Award, OIC, the Dare to Speak Out Award, Council of National Interest. She's honorary of the History Makers and received the Community Service Award from Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. She's a Hall of Fame inductee at Grambling University in Louisiana. Her memberships include Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, life member of the NAACP, member of the District of Columbia Bar Association, member of Alpha Kappa Mu National Honor Society, member of the United Nations Association, and the list goes on and out the door. And I'm gonna have to go get the rest of the papers. They're running out the door, so much of it. I would like to take this opportunity to meet my friend, our guest tonight, Dr. FAYE Williams.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a joy to be with you finally. I know that I've received the invitation before and I've been on the road doing a few things, but I am so excited to be here with you this evening.
Absolutely.
Hey, Dr. Williams.
Good to see your face again.
Sandra.
Since it doesn't stay in the same place too often, you're always on the move.
Well, I guess you have to do that when you're called a civic maker, civil rights worker, all those things you read about me. I still don't feel that I've done enough, so I've got a lot more to do before I get out of here. Unfortunately, my mom, who was of Cherokee blood, just transitioned a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was glad to hear you talk about the chief, Wilmer Mankiller, so I guess that means we're related.
Absolutely. I want to. Can you all see this?
I see it.
This is Dr. Williams' new book. It's called Dick Gregory, Wake Up and Stay Woke, Running for Life. And that's a picture of Dick Gregory when he was a young man in college running track. So we want to talk about this book and about with my friend, Dr. FAYE Williams. Are you ready, Dr. Williams?
I think I am.
Okay. So what inspired you to author a book about your friendship with Dick Gregory?
Well, some years ago, I met him in Louisiana when I was running for the United States Congress in my home state of Louisiana. He came with Congressman Mervyn Dimely to one of my events. And I met him then, and I kept talking about what my mother taught me. I would say, my mother taught me to do this. My mother taught me to do that, and whatever. And, he could walk up on a stage and just make up a show, not having heard very much about it or very little at the time. So he came on stage and he said, I've got to meet your mother because my children don't remember anything I say. The only way I get to talk to them is that I pull up to the refrigerator and sit there, and ultimately they come, and that's when I get to talk with them. But you so freely talk with your mother, and I did. My mom taught me to be an activist when I was a little girl.
So what was it that brought you together with Dick Gregory as friends?
Well, of course, I learned that he was an activist, but one night after I had returned to live in Washington and he spent a lot of his time here, he called me from Baltimore one night, a Friday night when the traffic, as you know, is heaviest anywhere and everywhere, and asked me to come and pick him up because he didn't have a ride after his show back to DC. And I thought, you don't know me that well. Now I met you, but you don't know me that well. But as it turned out, on the way back, we learned a lot about each other. And of course, I'd heard a lot about his activism. So I learned from him, of course, to be fearless. And I just sort of joined with him and began having a lot of protests and rallies all across the world, actually, with him. So that's how we got to know each other. And then when he made his transition, I was like lost. I mean, we had done so much together. We were going places together. We would get out of our car sometime and we saw a group of people out protesting, not knowing what the issue was. We just get out of the car, walk back and say, what's your issue? And when they would tell us, it usually was something we believed in. We just go to our cars, take some of those signs out and go back and join the group. So I was missing him so very much and decided that I could write about him because that's how sometimes I get through my pain, is to write about a situation.
Okay, so what was it that made you consider Dick Gregory as your best friend?
Well, again, it had a lot to do with the activism. And after I picked him up in Baltimore, he started coming over to my place and bringing a lot of friends. I guess he didn't have access to a kitchen or what have you. He would bring a lot of friends and teach them how to do veggie burgers. And of course, he put so much cheese on it. I would say, wow, I don't know how healthy this is with all this cheese. But he did invite a lot of people over and he taught them, it's not what it is, whether it's veggies or whether it's meat or whatever. It's the seasoning you put in it that makes it great. So then when we finished doing the veggie burgers for all of his friends, he wanted to show me how to wash dishes. Now, this comes as a surprise to his family because they never knew he knew how to wash dishes. So he would tell me, okay, we go to the sink, you put the dishes in. He said, just rinse them off, put them in the sink, get some hot water and some Clorox. You soak them for a while, then you put them in the dishwasher. And I'm thinking, my God, if I got to do all that, I won't be washing many dishes. But at least that's the way he showed me how to do it, while I'm wondering, like that little girl on television, well, what is the dishwasher for after you do all those other things? But as I said, his family is always surprised to know some of the things. I say he taught me how to make up a bed. He was in the military. They have this special way to make up their beds, and just little things like that that he never did at home.
Okay, now, Ife, there are a lot of books and writings interspersed throughout the world on Dick Gregory's life. What makes your book, Wake Up and Stay Woke, different from all of that?
Well, there's absolutely a lot. As you said, there was a documentary that just came out this weekend about his life. But the difference is they maybe researched him. They learned something he did years ago, what have you. I knew them because I lived them with him. I protested, I picketed, I traveled with him. I read books to him, propping my eyes open some nights because he wanted me to read entire books for him some nights. And didn't matter that I was sleepy. He just had to have this book. He had to have the information. And of course, as you know, he loved newspapers. He bought hundreds of dollars worth of magazines and books and newspapers. And of course, in the process of reading to him, I learned a lot.
Yes. Okay. Now, you describe Dick Gregory as brave and fearless in chapter 4 of your book. And by the way, you all need to go and get this book. It's on Amazon. Get this book. I got this book. It's an excellent book. In chapter 4, you wrote, seeing his bravery so often just seal my belief that fear should never stop anybody from doing the right thing. In what specific way have you implemented his philosophy in your own life? The Watts riot, Carver Junior High School. Okay.
I worked at Carver junior high school in California. That was my first job as a teacher. And by the way, one of my 7th grade students introduced me when I was in Los Angeles a few weeks ago. And it was so surprising to see him now all grown up and Los Angeles City Council member,
Wow.
Thomas. But what happened there was he was intervening in problems when there was at first I called it a revolution, but he said it wasn't a revolution, that was a riot. He said for revolution you got to have plans, and I don't think the people at that time they were just rioting, as he said, but they were rioting for a cause. So he went out and he tried to calm the situation down. In the process, he was shot in the leg. And I saw him out there walking around just among, walking right into the bullets, walking right into to the challenges. And I saw him do the same thing many times after that. So he always told me that fear and God do not occupy the same space. And since I believe in this universal God, I had to understand that that could not keep me from doing something. I couldn't be fearful. And of course, I went on many trips after that. I even went to Haiti, and unfortunately, their president was just assassinated. I was there when President Aristide was kicked out of the country. I've been on a ship out in the ocean, out in the Arabian Sea, if you remember the first Gulf War. I just kept doing things, and the fear leaves you when you know that what you're doing is important, and it may well be making a difference for a lot of people.
Okay.
So, Dr. Williams, you met him in 1986, and you were running for Congress in Louisiana, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So, having known him for,
don't tell him how many years.
30, more than 30, I think.
Absolutely, yes.
And at the point that he passed away in 2017, what do you think is something that your life would be very different in had you not met him and been able to have that friendship with him?
Well, I probably would not have participated in so many of the rallies and what have you. I certainly would not have gotten involved in the British petroleum oil spill when many people were afraid to even claim their own rights from this big company that had this oil spill, had pretty much ruined their property, had gone out of business for many reasons. I got involved in that simply because of him. And one of the special things about it was that we had a chance to spend a lot of time together. I remember we flew to New Orleans once because we wanted to show people not to be afraid, to fight for your rights. These things were ruined for you by this major oil company that has a whole lot of money, and they were not just automatically paying these people for the damage. So we decided to take a two-week trip driving through the South to talk with people, to hold meetings with them, rallies, etc., teaching them about what their rights were and how they would file. Now, we had to travel after we arrived in New Orleans over to Mississippi and on into Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, Florida, and we were going to go all the way down to Miami. Now, when I say we drove, first of all, an SUV was rented for me. I'd never driven an SUV before, but we needed that SUV because if when Mr. Gregory traveled, he traveled with a whole lot of bags, right? I had one bag. He had 11 bags. So we needed that big car to take it. But he always had what you wanted, whether it was a certain vitamin or whatever. He had it in one of those bags. So I kept thinking we were going to drive. We would get to a certain point after he woke up and said, "You want me to drive?" And I'm like, "We're already where we were going." So this happened all the way down in Florida, that I drove from the top of Florida over in Pensacola all the way down to West Palm Beach and into Miami, etc. He didn't drive a mile, but we took the trip, to stop and talk to people about what rights they had.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
So speaking of being in a car, you note in your book that that you and he sat in a Tesla, a driverless car, I think Tesla. I want to say I never had a dream car until I drove a Tesla. I did not care until I drove a Tesla. Those cars.
Go buy one.
And his son, Dr. Christian Gregory, has one now. So I've had a chance to ride in the Tesla. And I have a couple of friends in California, too, who also have Teslas. All of my friends keep saying, you need to get one. I'm not sure I want another car. I think I want to just keep walking, the way that he walked most places that he went. And I just don't think I want to drive anymore after this. I've driven so much in my life. And driving with him was, kind of an experience too. I remember driving down in Virginia with him at one time. And I kind of looked up after I'd been, looking down at my phone. I looked up after I told him where to get off. But he didn't ever allow you to rush him. He would just say, oh, too bad. And he'd keep going. So I looked up and we were in the middle of this big apartment complex. And he's sitting there with his hands over the steering wheel, waiting for me to tell him where we were and how we were going to get out of there. Well, I just had to, use women's intuition and figure out turn left, turn right, let's do this. I didn't know what I was doing, but it all worked out okay. And by the time we got to where we were going, which only should have taken about 45 minutes to an hour, it was about 3 hours later, but they were waiting for him.
Wow.
We were accustomed to waiting for him this time.
If you're in Northern Virginia, sometimes it takes 3 hours anyway. It doesn't matter if you know where you're going.
Right. Ife,
yes.
Your radio broadcast shares the same title as your book.
Yes.
Share how you got started in the radio broadcast industry. What rewards do you believe your audiences gain from your show?
Well, when Kathy Hughes over at Radio 1, WL, it was just called then, I was going out, she was transitioning out of radio. She would call me to come and fill in for her. And of course, Dick Gregory was always calling in. You never had to worry about a guest when he was anywhere around. It didn't matter. He's called from Spain or from any other place he was traveling. And basically, he took over the show. You didn't have to worry about having a guest at all. So I did that for her for quite a while. And then when she was completely out of radio, she allowed me to have a show. I then, stopped working on her radio program, and I worked for several other stations. But then when Mr. Gregory died, I had a call from WPFW. I had worked to replace several people, for a day or for 2 days or what have you. And they invited me back on. So, of course, the challenge was what I would name my program. Mr. Gregory's daughter, Ayana, and I had been in the room. We were with him most of the days for that whole week that he was at Sibley Hospital. And I couldn't think of anything better to say than when he was looking at television the day that he left us, actually, and people were making so much noise in his room. And he just sort of raised up and used, those Gregory phrases, which I can't repeat on your show, and said, shut the whatever up. You need to listen. You need to wake up and stay woke. You can't learn anything if you're not listening. So naturally, when I got the radio program, I decided that I wanted to name my program that, because those were the last words I heard him say.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Now, you wrote many interesting stories shared between the two of you. Which one or two of these stories do you consider to be the most life-altering?
Well, of course, the week that he was ill in the hospital was one of those weeks, because we didn't get a chance to talk a lot, but it was understood that if I said something to the doctor, to the nurse, along with his son, Christian, he then believed it should be done.
Yeah.
He was very suspicious about a lot of things, and rightly so. But when someone came in to try to give him blood, is one of the last things that I remember. And every time they stuck the needle in his arm, the blood just kept shooting back out. And I finally said to them, no, don't do it anymore, because he was obviously rejecting the blood. And later that evening, the doctors came in. There were several who came in. This is after he'd been in the hospital for a week, and he was about to go home the next day. We had been told he'd be able to go home. But when that happened, the doctors came in late that evening and said, we just figured out what's wrong with you, but you're going to have to go over to George Washington Hospital for us to do surgery. And he, rejected things like that. So I think that evening when he heard that word about surgery, he just decided he was not going to let it happen. He went downstairs. They took him downstairs. All of us left to go home, including Mrs. Gregory and all of his children. And of course, he never made it to the transport vehicle, even though he had been scheduled to go home the next day. I think he decided that it was time for him to go.
He was such an extraordinary individual with a gargantuan heart for humankind. What was it that drove him so hard, Ife? What was it?
You know, he grew up like many of us grew up. He grew up poor, even though we didn't know that we were poor at the time, but that is what we learned later in life. We didn't have a lot of resources. He didn't have a lot of resources. And I think he wanted to make sure that he made a difference so that many people following behind him would not have the same situation he had. I'll tell you one story, for instance, when he was in high school running track, and his name, of course, was Richard Gregory. And when he was running track and winning all these track meets that people were usually listening to on the radio, they weren't seeing the person. But the people at the school decided to name him Dick Gregory. And his mom would hear about this Dick Gregory, and she would wish, oh, I wish that was my son doing all these things. What she didn't know was that was her son.
Yeah.
All those things. She never went to a track meet, even though he was winning. And then he felt that he was cheated out of the records that he did because they only put white students in the big end of the year paper from his Sumner High School and other high schools in St. Louis. So those were just some of the things. In fact, he would say when he was growing up, he was so poor that if a rat ran across the floor, he just knew they were taking a shortcut someplace else because they didn't have nothing to give to the rat. So he,
I remember that. He told me that.
Yes. So it was the way that he came up, and he wanted to make sure that in life he was going to work to make a difference for others. Always like women with intellectual women. You would often see him with women who were very learned, who had lots of degrees, etc. He had a great deal of respect for women who did that. So I'm hoping I was in that group, you know, because we did so many things together.
Oh, you know you were.
Yeah, but I just found him amazing because he was not afraid to do anything, and in the process, I think I became fearless. I became like him in a lot of ways.
Well, you know something. Can I share a Dick Gregory story with you?
Oh, sure. I'll tell you whether it's funny or not.
Oh, well, okay. Well, we'll see.
Okay.
He called me one night around 10:30.
That was early.
I know. He said, boy, what you doing? I said, I'm getting ready to go to bed. No, well, you need to wake up and stay woke because I want to run something by you.
All right.
Okay. He said, I'll take 15 minutes. And that was 10:30 at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I know, it was 6:30 in the morning. It's only going to take 15 minutes.
That's
that man had no idea of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, you know, you had to love him because it was always something very vibrant about how he spoke to you and something very enlightening about anything he told you. You know, I think Dick Gregory could have convinced a roach on the floor to climb the wall up to the next apartment building.
Absolutely, because as I was listening to the documentary, the one and only Dick Gregory, and I was looking at all these these big time comedians, and they were all talking about how he taught them something and how he made them shut up and listen to him. He had that knack, you know. Sometimes people would try to argue with him. Big mistake.
Big mistake.
Yes.
I saw him. You know, he was very involved in Native American community and a lot of the Native American political affairs. And I think it was well, I'm not sure where it was. I know it was somewhere up north, right? And he just happened to be there. And he looked across the room and said, come here, boy. And I knew it was him because I didn't let too many people call me a boy. And I went over to him. He says, what's wrong with that big fellow standing up there on the podium there? I said, what you mean? He ain't talking enough but a bunch of nonsense. He can't be a chief. I said, why? Because he's too stupid.
Well, it didn't mean that he didn't help a lot of indigenous people. I know you will remember his trip to the upper Northwest. Not only him, but Mrs. Gregory also went there and
William,
killed for fishing rights for our people up there. And
Billy Franks Jr. Billy Franks Jr. was the man he went up to help. Right. And he was a friend of mine too.
And let me tell you how nice he was. He left Mrs. Gregory in jail while he went out to drum up some support for the issue. I said, I don't know if that was the best thing that he ever did, but bless her heart, she stayed there because you know, she wanted to be very supportive too. And she, of course, was very supportive of all the things that he did.
Yeah.
At a certain point, she had 10 children she had to take care of too. He didn't have to worry about that, except maybe, you know, sending money home. But,
well, you know, I'll tell you this about his wife, Lillian. You know, you speak very fondly of her. His family also had to make great sacrifices because of his work.
Yes.
How did you witness him as a father and a husband in light of his life's work? How did you witness that?
Well, one of the things is we would go to a lot of movies. And the moment we walked out of the movie, which sometimes we had seen 8 or 10 times, you know, because he wanted to drain every little bit out of a movie. And he recommended everybody to go and see certain movies because he didn't want them to miss anything. The first thing he did as soon as he came out of the movie was to go to the phone, no matter how long I had to stand there and wait for him, and call Mrs. Gregory. They would discuss the movie because I understand she liked movies too. So I would be standing there waiting for him. So that was one of the things. And the other thing is he made it clear to the children's schools that it was Mrs. Gregory who was in charge of the children, not him.
Excuse me.
He knew that he was on the road and he wouldn't be able to handle it. But he honored her by making sure they understood whatever she said about the children, that is what would go. And then, of course, Mrs. Gregory was so wonderful because she gave, you know, a lot of his time to his civil and human rights work without complaining. When he passed away, they had been married for over 50 years, I think. I always, all my friends together haven't been married that long. But he was on the road so much, and she had the major responsibility, the big responsibility of taking care of the children. And you know what? Those children are so sweet, so kind.
Yes, they are.
She did a great job without having him around all of the time. In fact, they tell me some jokes about things that they did since he wasn't at home a lot. But to him, this civil rights work, this doing things for the many people was more important, he felt, than any one thing in his family. Although he cared for his family financially, he took care of his family. He just couldn't be there because he was out doing something for the bigger and the greater good.
Well, you know, Dick Gregory had a very special spirit about him. You know, every time I saw him, it was just Dick Gregory's here. Dick Gregory's in the room. And one time I was sitting in the studio at the radio station, and somebody said, "Mr. Dick Gregory is here." I said, "So?" "What?" I said, "Yeah, so? Is that something special?" So he walked. I was on the radio. He walked in the room. He said, "You're damn right it's something special. I'm here, boy." And of course, we bust out laughing. He came over and I gave him a hug. He said, "All right, what you want me to do?" I said, "How about sitting down and being quiet for a few minutes?" "I'll sit down, but I'm not going to be quiet." "Okay." And we carried on for like a half an hour. Faye,
Wow.
your book, this great book, what is it that you want people to walk away from with after they read this book? I walked away with so much.
Well, that is exactly what I wanted. Many people knew him as a comic. I wanted them to know he was so much more than a comic. I mean, he was a nutritionist. He cared about our health. He was always advising people. He was sending them to the right natural health care doctor. He would carry vitamins around with him.
Oh, God, yes.
Recipes for any and everything that you can think of.
And one of his suitcases.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, of course. He had valuable things in all of those bags. And everybody at every airport in the world knew him and allowed him to bring on all of those bags.
I remember his bohemian diet. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. And people always ask about that. And just before Mr. Gregory left us, one of his friends, John Bellamy in Chicago, worked on a new product. It's called the Caribbean Optimal Health. And I always tell people that just look the word up, Caribbean Optimal Health Diet. And in my book, I mention it so they can have the exact title, but I also mention all the vitamins that went along with that because people loved that Bahamian diet. A lot of people got rich on it. Of course, he did too, but he gave all that money away or he lost it. So
yeah. Now,
So one of his quotes, I see there's many sites that are dedicated to a lot of, he has a lot of beautiful quotes. One of them, I'm reading it, and it seems to me to fit into that model that you've designated in your book, Get Woke, Stay Woke. So his quote was, I was learning that just being a Negro doesn't qualify you to understand the race situation any more than being sick makes you an expert on medicine.
Absolutely. Well, we've had people that sometimes we've called them traitors. We even have some now. Well, those are people who don't understand. And many of them have suffered the same kinds of things that others of us who work in the civil and human rights movement have suffered. But they maybe have gotten this big salary. They have grown, quote, above everybody. And they think everybody can just do, come up and do anything they want to do, when that is not the case, because we don't have the same opportunities. And many people like him lost a lot of things they had because they were outspoken on behalf of other people. So I think that is one thing that we have to remember. He was also a civil, and not just civil rights, but human rights worker for people all around the world, not just for Black people, but people all around the world.
I know he did a lot of work in Indian country with the original founders of AIM, the American Indian Movement.
Yes.
And one day he was at this radio station, and I was going to go do my show, and I had a cough, right? He put in his pocket and pulled out a napkin, and in that napkin he had some pills in it. He says, "Here, boy, take these, you'll be all right." I said, "Wait." I said, "You had that in your pocket?" "Yeah, all day." I said, "You expect me to take that? You better take it." Less than 5 minutes later, after I took that, I stopped coughing. The man was a miracle worker. I mean, he could just look at you and tell you what was wrong with you,
Absolutely.
And he didn't bite his tongue. That's what I loved and respect about him, So can you tell us how my viewers can get a copy of your book? This is a very important book.
Absolutely. Well, if they're in Washington, D.C., I will be having a book signing on Saturday morning at my place, which is 1250 4th Street Southwest here in Washington, D.C. That's 1250 4th Street in Washington, D.C. And of course, I'm doing it all afternoon to give people who say, well, I'm busy at 12. That's okay. Come at 1. If you're busy at 1, come at 2. So I'm there all afternoon from noon until 5 on this Saturday. It's also on Amazon and on Kindle. Also, Busboys Poets here in Washington, D.C. in the Southeast branch on Martin Luther King. They are carrying the book. Yes. I just came from Sacramento with people there listening. Kevin Johnson's mom has a bookstore there. She is carrying it. So we're building on places people can get it. There's no excuse for not getting it. If you just can't find it anywhere, just call me. My number is very open. I have a website, which is drefayewilliams.com. You can get information there as to where else you can get it. And I'm traveling all over. I'm on the way to Houston and to Dallas. And after that, Birmingham and Atlanta, where I'm receiving another award, by the way, in Atlanta. It's called, Civil Rights Foot Soldier. I mean, that's a great title. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm traveling all over. I've been to Los Angeles, San Diego, St. Louis, Carbondale, Illinois, my mom's church in Louisiana. Wherever someone invites me to come and do a book signing, I'm happy to go there, because I think the story of Dick Gregory needs to be told in terms of all the things that he did.
Okay, I want to show people something. See, this is my book, and you got a big old number 1 on, and so I got the first copy.
Right.
Dated 6/20/2021. It says, "My dearest Jay, thank you for being a friend, a great friend. Love you, FAYE Williams."
Aww.
If this book is missing out of my house, I'm gonna hurt somebody real bad.
Yeah, but the point of the number,
protected.
The point of the number is that it makes it more valuable. So to each city I go, I give people a number. I want them to remember, and those are really special, the ones who get that number 1. So Jay was number 1. He walked up to where I was doing the book signing, and so he got number 1.
Yay.
Yes.
So Dr. Williams, if your book is made into a movie, how many times do you think that Dick Gregory would watch it if he were able to attend?
Oh, he'll be watching. Everybody says, "Oh, he's watching over you." I think
Mhm.
I managed to get a bit part in his documentary that's running now on Showtime, and he was like a father in many ways to me. One of the things he always said is, "I just think you need to get married." And I thought, well, if I found someone to get married to, he would be just like a father. He would say, "No, no, no, not him, not him." So I never did that, but I depended upon him for a lot. And I do get messages. I don't know about those of you who believe in psychic messages, but there are psychics who call me who don't even know me and give me messages from him.
Wow.
Well, our producer, Leslie Fry, is from St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, I am proud to claim Mr. Gregory as a St. Louis native. A lot of amazing people come from there. And she said, we're 10. Okay. So we only got 5 minutes. So at this point, thank you, Sandra. I would want to not allow, I would request that my friend, Dr. Ife Williams, make a closing statement and promise me before you leave, will you come back again?
Oh, of course. I've had so much fun with you and Sandra. I'd love to come back. So thank you. I know it took me a long time to get here, but I'm glad I did. And again, thank you for having me on to talk about the Dick Gregory book. We don't always have all the funds it takes to go around to
Mhm.
promote our books, but with friends like you who allow me to talk about the book, I know that many of you were friends with Mr. Gregory. And again, they're young people who need to read the things about which he did without fear, without charging people. He would do so many things without charging people. He would speak for any banquet. All he had to do was walk in a room and somebody called him up. He would give you a full speech. I mean, when I say full, sometimes he would still be talking 3-4 hours later.
I
And
know.
no, very few people, I would say, were getting up to leave because they wanted to hang on to every word. And if you listen to that documentary, the one and only Dick Gregory, you'll see major comedians talk about how they were impressed with him, what they learned from him about their timing, etc. And by the way, he did say that President Barack Obama would have made a great comedian because he had great timing. Now, he told me I would have made a great comedian too, but I couldn't use the language he used. So that sort of kept me from doing it. But once in a while, I can get a laugh. And I'd like to leave you with one of his other little stories. And that is the one when he was down south and he ordered food. And the waitress told him, "We don't serve colored people here." And he said, "Good, I don't eat them either. Give me a whole fried chicken." So he got the fried chicken. And in come these big sheriffs. "Boy, anything you do to that chicken, I'm going to do to you." And he picked the chicken up and kissed it on its rear end.
Wow. Yay. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Ife. It's been,
all right. Love you.
I love you too. It's been very enjoyable.
Yes.
And thank you for telling me you're coming back again because I will be calling you.
Right. And I look forward to that time being a bestseller.
All right.
Yes,
All
yes,
right.
yes.
Goodbye.
So listen, everybody, pay attention to Dick Gregory's last words to Dr. Williams because they're applicable to all of us. Get woke, stay woke.
Wake up and stay woke. Wake up and stay woke.
Wake up and stay woke.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to my closing statement. You don't have to leave, Dr. Williams, right now. My closing statement is the same words that I give you every week. My grandfather used to always tell us things like, you don't have to, your brother or your sister do not have to look like you to be your brother or your sister. He says, everybody's entitled to a chance. And that was Dick Gregory's life. I knew Dick Gregory. He was a friend, and often he would refer to me as his Native American nephew. Dick Gregory had a hell of an impact on my life. I was so honored to have known such a great human being. When I was informed of his passing, I was so sad, so hurt. One telephone call conversation I will always cherish. I was also happy to bring Clyde Bellecourt, one of the original founders of AIM, to Dick Gregory's funeral. And I brought him to the podium with me. There was somebody telling us you only got 5 minutes. And I looked at him, I said, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Europe." I said, "Well, first of all, you ain't got time to tell me that I only got 5 minutes, because first of all, you're standing on land that belonged to my people." I was also so grateful and happy that I could bring an American Indian drum to his funeral and have them play on Uncle Dick Gregory's funeral. And these were people from many different tribes. The men on the drum that evening were members of many American Indian nations. So Uncle Dick, I know you can hear me. I love you, Dick Gregory. And one day I will see you again, along with many of my ancestors, family members. I will see you again one day, Uncle Dick. So I'm asking you to do one thing for me from way out there where you are. As a lot of people have heard in sermons, and especially Black churches, Uncle Dick Gregory, save a seat for me, because one day I will join you. I'm J. Winter Nightwolf, and this is the American Indian and Indigenous Peoples Truth, Justice for All, the most dangerous show on media anywhere. Stay strong, stay on your feet, and get involved. We're living in some very dangerous times now. And we need to make a difference. What difference, Nightwolf? Of looking out and helping each other. If there's somebody that you know in your neighborhood that's hungry, give them something to eat. If there's somebody in your neighborhood who've lost a loved one, go down and show them some compassion and love. Don't cost you nothing. Wake up and stay woke. I'll talk to you again this time next week. But I want you to be prepared, because the month of August, we will take a hiatus, but we'll be back September the 8th. I love you all of you. Even those of you that make it impossible to love. I love you anyway. Because as a singer made in the 60s a song, love makes the world go round. And his name was Deion Jackson. I'll talk to you next week. Danada, Goai, Wado.